Welcome to the podcast. I'm Chris Graham. It's Monday. We're going to talk NASCAR with Rod Mullins, and we're going to break down how things went on the track yesterday in Vegas as Hendrick Motorsports sweeping the top three spots. And, Rod, we were talking before we hit record, maybe not the most exciting race until the very end.
Right.
But then things really went out of whack there at the end with a caution and overtime. Take us into how things went down.
Well, I mean, like we were talking, this was not exactly the most thrilling race in the world. I mean, William Byron, he ended up leading over, I guess it was about 100 some laps, 100 plus laps is what he was doing in order to come up with the win. But, out of nowhere came that caution right there with just a few laps left to go before the end of this race. And it all came down to pit road. That's what it came down to, whether or not you were going to make the stop for two tires, get a little bit of fuel, a splash just to get you through, because the tires on some of these cars were very much worn out. Martin Truex is the one that probably attests to that more than anybody else. He held out there, was hoping that he'd have enough tires to make it and pick up his first win of 2023. And for likewise, last year, he's been winless last year into this year. And so he was hoping to pick up a race win, but his tires weren't good enough. I mean, with the cooler temperatures in the 50s per se, I guess on Sunday at Las Vegas, it was cool. It's out in the desert. These tires, of course, when they cool off and then they start to heat back up again, well, that's when the situation changes a little bit. And he just didn't have any grip on those tires whatsoever. And then lo and behold, William Byron ends up winning by inches off of pit road. I'd say at least a good 5 inches or more over Kyle Larson coming off of pit road. And when he does that, puts himself into place to where he overtakes Martin Truex Jr., gets the win. But unfortunately, Kyle Larson kind of on the bad end of the stick, so to speak. He could have won the race, but he ends up coming in second, and then Alex Bowman coming in third for Hendrick Motorsports.
Yeah, Larson was cruising there before that wreck with a couple laps to go. Eric Almirola hitting the wall. I mean, he was a good several seconds ahead of the field there at the end there. And what was it? I mean, for him, whenever there's a restart at the end of a race like this, it becomes a drag race as much as it is a NASCAR race. Just not enough there at the end.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think there was just not enough there at the end for him to be able to. I think he even admitted, he said that, lo and behold, William probably had a stronger car than what he had. He'd had a good car all day, but, he had a stronger car. It was just a shame, too, because this was probably Hendrick's best finish in quite a while, too. But they did this minus Chase Elliott. And we'll talk a little bit about the Chase Elliott situation here in a little bit. But, it forced the Hendrick Motorsports team into going to a driver that Junior Motorsports has used in the past, and that is Josh Berry. He ended up substituting for Elliott on the race yesterday. But, as I break down this race and I look at it the way that it all came out, it really wasn't a big surprise in the case that I thought that there was going to at least be a Chevrolet win. I thought Kyle Busch might end up winning. I think he ended up finishing 10th out of this. Wasn't a bad effort for him at his home track, but still, you look at this whole situation, it was a little bit of a surprise for me and the Chevrolets and for Hendrick Motorsports, because Ford has been dominant at this track. You would think that a Ford would have probably been able to dial in, and some of the teams did do pretty well. Kevin Harvick didn't do too bad on the day overall out in Las Vegas, but in the end, it was the Chevrolets, it was Hendrick Motorsports power that got them across the finish line, and they finished 1, 2, 3.
Now, you mentioned Chase Elliott. Let's go ahead and dive into that topic here. Fractured tibia on Friday in a snowboarding accident. What's the latest on Chase?
Well, he's in for recovery. It's going to be several weeks of recovery. They were kind of hushed mouthed about this when it first broke and all this stuff happened. We just knew that Chase Elliott was not going to be in the race. And then as it got closer to Sunday, the race time and so forth, we start getting an idea. He was snowboarding. Something happened while he was snowboarding. He's not going to be with them for several weeks. Yeah, this is going to put a hurt on Hendrick Motorsports, especially with Chase Elliott looking like at one point he was primed to be able to make a run for another championship run this year, but things were going to have to pay off. But, it's kind of opened this door up now to where some of these car owners and, car team managers are going to have to put their foot down. I mean, I don't blame somebody for having a life outside of racing. It was entirely up to Chase Elliott if he wanted to go, and he wanted to go skiing in Colorado and do that, or go snowboarding for that matter. But, you're taking a chance. Every time, I think we probably heard this story coming up as we were growing up, you're taking a chance every time you go out in a car. If you go out in a car, whether it be driving at 55 miles an hour or 200 miles an hour, you're taking a chance. If you're going to play baseball, if you're going to play softball or something, there's always the chance you could get hit upside of the head by a baseball or a softball just in a charity match or something. And then lo and behold, you get a concussion out of it. And the concussion may not be as bad as a racing concussion, but it still has opened up this whole can of worms again about whether or not some of these drivers should take it easy when they are racing during the season, and kind of look out for things possibly happening like this. And I think that's what's happened now with this whole Chase Elliott thing. We are back to another square one, if you want to call it that. Where are these drivers going to go now, or what are they going to do in order to, compensate for the downtime and stuff, in order to have at least a little bit of a life?
I was going to ask about repercussions or possible repercussions for Chase here. Mm-hmm. In team sports like, baseball, football, basketball, hockey, I know that it's standard into the contracts now for those athletes in those sports that there are a long number of activities you're not allowed to participate in if you're going to play for a professional sports team. Motorcycle driving, mm-hmm. Skiing, snowboarding, lots of things that could lead to injury. Are simply prohibited in those. And so of course, if guys or gals in women's sports of those natures end up getting hurt, they could actually lose money. Their contracts could be voided in certain cases if there's a really serious career-ending injury suffered outside of the playing field. So sounds like that's not a standard thing in NASCAR contracts.
No, it's not. And, Kevin Harvick has owned race teams and so forth. He operates a company that represents and advises young drivers, and he tells them more than anything else to be smart, but to live their lives. He agrees there's a life outside of racing and stuff, and you've got to be able to go and live your life, kind of keep yourself sane, or this deal will eat you up. And I agree with that, because sooner or later, all the different type of events that you have to appear at and so forth, it takes away from your life. It takes away from your life with your family and so forth. And your wife has to be as accepting, or your husband, in this case, if you're a female driver that's on the circuit, they've got to be accepting of that sport. The kids also have to be accepting of the sport. But, sometimes living their own lives can eat them up, as it did this past weekend. And, Elliott spent 3 hours of surgery on Friday night and then was released on Saturday. So, a pretty quick surgery. I'm sure that they've probably have had to go and reattach it with either screws, whatever, plates or something to reattach where this bone was broken at and so forth. But, he starts rehab, scheduled to start it today. They're saying he could be out of several weeks. But depending on how his physical well-being is, we could see him back in maybe about 3 or 4 weeks or something, give or take, if he's healing well enough. But, Rick Hendrick has kind of loosened policy in the last several years, because he used to frown on drivers competing in, like you mentioned, sprint car events and other dangerous activities and so forth. But the team president said, Jeff Andrews said Saturday in a quote, he doesn't anticipate a change. These guys have to go out and live a life outside of the racetrack. And, I didn't know this. The Elliott family's had a home in Vail for several years. So it was kind of a stop-off point, I guess, for him to be able to go and kind of release some energy before they headed out to, the race and everything, and try to do something in Las Vegas. But, it's just one of those things. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about this in the coming days and weeks to come, as we anticipate him to hopefully return before it's over with. But it's going to be a painful return. I'm sure Kyle Busch probably remembers that well. Broke his leg at Daytona in a wreck, and then managed to get back into the thick of things and still managed to win a championship that year. After NASCAR let him kind of get back into it, he was able to get back into the race and ended up winning the championship, but not without having some pain along the line. And you just have to suck it up and grit your teeth and say, I'm going to go out and do it.
Now, you're saying you don't think there will be any repercussions in terms of contracts in the future. I'd be surprised, man. I tell you what, if I'm owning a team, I want to make sure my guy, I have a lot of money invested in that team. I want to make sure that the guy that I've chosen to be in that seat is there. Hey, I wanted to ask, what do you know which leg it was? And depending on which leg it was, how does that impact when he comes back? You know, I mean, obviously he might have some rustiness and we both broken bones and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's not just automatic that you get everything back when you get back from a broken bone. How would that impact either his ability to shift gears or put, you know, the pedal to the metal, etc.?
It's his left tibia is what it is. Okay. So we can at least say in one regard that if he's on a super speedway or he's on one of the 1.5 mile tracks, he's not going to have as much difficulty because his right foot's going to be doing a lot of the stuff. And a lot of the drivers train themselves to do gas with their right, sometimes to brake with their right sometimes, and then they still you know, one of those gearing things, you know, I don't know if they've still got the clutch per se in there in this next generation car, but a lot of drivers used to use that other pedal, of course, for the clutch out of this. But now we're in a completely different day and age now. It might be one of those things of where he might use the left foot a little bit on the brake and stuff, and then still use the gas. Some of those drivers do that. It will really take a toll on him. If he's hoping to get back in by Bristol, Bristol could be extremely tough on him because Bristol is one of those tracks that will just beat him to death. And it's a dirt track this time around. It's going to be the dirt track for the first round. And it could be very rough on him. Now, it could also be rough on him if they're thinking of Circuit of the Americas when they go to Austin, Texas, and they race that track. That's going to cause some problems. You know, straightaways, not too much of a problem, but when you start to hit the curves and so forth, you're going to have to be able to make adjustments. That could cause him some problems. I'm anticipating him being out at least up to 6 to 8 weeks is what I'm guessing right now at this point. And then at that 8-week point, if he has shown healing per se, and that bone has started to knit back and everything looks okay of where they've done the surgery, and we still don't know to what extent that it is right now. It could have been one of those, breaks that they had to put a rod in. And if it's a case of putting a rod in there, that's not going to be as much trouble as it would be allowing the bone to heal back normally. That would be the question mark that I would have. So, you know, I'm anticipating at least 6 to 8 weeks just as a guess out of this whole thing. But it could be a little bit longer depending on, you know, how he heals up as a driver.
I think we talked about this. Josh Berry took his seat on Sunday, and it looks like Hendrick's talking about they'll make a decision on who will more permanently, at least, you know, in the interim basis, take on that ride over the next several weeks. So they have some choices to make there.
Yeah, I think that's probably, and you know, they've got a good stable of. Hendrick's not running per se the Xfinity series as much as he has an active involvement with Junior Motorsports, and so there you've got just a treasure trove of drivers that you could plug into those particular areas. Josh Berry is one that Junior Motorsports and Dale Jr. has been very high on, very popular on. You know, he really wants to get him a seat ride one day in the Cup Series, and this is good experience for him. You know, I anticipated him doing okay. But he finished 29th, I think, is what he finished.
That's right.
And I think he was like a lap or two behind, I think, at the end of the race. But, you know, not a bad, you know, start for him, and especially at a track that can be very tricky sometimes at Las Vegas. As you know, Eric Almirola had the incident happen right before the end of the race, and we really had some times of some brushes against the wall coming through there, and a lot of them, I think, misjudged going into the turn, and then they touched the right fender, the right back part of the car, and that could have caused some big wrecks yesterday. But I think he did well considering he, you know, just kind of held in there and held his own as a driver. I don't think it was a disappointment by any means. But now if we get to the third or fourth race and he's still in that seat and he's not making any forward progress where he needs to be going, there'll probably be a change, something like that along the line.
You mentioned the wall yesterday. Joey Logano had a good run until he hit the wall, and ending his day, and had to go back to the garage. They couldn't get his car fixed in time. Talk about Logano. He started well. He was running well, and then just got caught up in some action there.
Yeah, he got caught up in that. I think it was that arm, that toe arm back in there that once it tapped the wall and it hit the wall, that thing is broke, and you've got to go and you've got to bring it into the pits. And sometimes you've got enough time to be able to do it. This is where the hard part's at. I mean, if you go into the pits and you're there and you're being tended to, you've got so many minutes in order to replace it in and stuff and be able to fix it. And, I think in this case, the damage was just a little bit beyond what they could fix on pit road. And so they just pretty much cashed it in for the day. It just changes the way that the standings are, I think, more than anything else, because Logano was in there, had good performances in the first couple of races of the season. And then you turn around and now you find Ross Chastain in number one in the first position, Alex Bowman on his third place finish yesterday in the Las Vegas race. He comes in second. Kevin Harvick is third. Daniel Suarez in that Trackhouse Racing team is fourth. And Martin Truex, although he did not have a good finish to this race and so forth yesterday, he comes in at fifth. So he's still hanging there with Denny Hamlin in sixth, Christopher Bell in seventh, Kyle Busch, surprisingly, in eighth place and the number 8 car there. Then Joey Logano drops all the way down to ninth after that happened to him yesterday. And then Chris Buescher rounds out the top 10 in the point standings, the driver standings as we have them so far. So, kind of a big surprise. We're starting to see that continuance of power in there from Trackhouse Motorsports with Chastain and Suarez both in there running in the top 5. I mean, you can't beat that, having a team that's got 2 cars and they're running there in the top 5. And then look at Hendrick. Hendrick only has Bowman out of that group right there in the top 10. So it's a statement there in itself for Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports to have Bowman there, but you'd expect, William Byron to be in there. You'd also expect, a Chase Elliott to be in there. You would expect, these drivers, but some of these guys are not there. That means that Alex Bowman has been keeping his nose clean so far. He may not have been the recipient of some good fortune in the first 2 or first 3 races and everything, or first 2 races, but he has kept his nose clean, and he's been where he needed to be at in order to make this point jump where he picked up 57 points, and that vaulted him into the second position in the point standings.
Bubba Wallace had a good ride yesterday, finished fourth. He was the first among the non-Hendrick drivers yesterday. And it's first good ride for him in a while, maybe a couple of years. He was running sixth when the caution came out with 2 laps to go. I read where he said he was thinking about just kind of settling for 6th because he was about 8 or 9 seconds behind at that stage. But he, like the rest of the field, was given a chance to make a run at the end. I think he finished less than a second behind the eventual winner. But all in all, a good day for Wallace.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that this team, the longer that they kind of stay together and they kind of work together about things, we're going to see more out of this Bubba Wallace team, especially out of this 2311 Motorsports. He's really stepping up to the plate. The one that's kind of gone south, per se, if you really want to say this, is Tyler Reddick. Bragged about that he was going to be this great driver that came over from Richard Childress Racing, and he was going to step into the 2311 Motorsports stable, and they expected big things out of him right out of the gate. And right now he is not doing well whatsoever. I think in the last time I looked at the points right here, 34th in points. And this was out of somebody that made it into, I think, the final 8 before, he finally had to bow out last year in the Richard Childress Racing Chevrolet. So it's kind of a surprise for Tyler Reddick there to find himself in 34th place. And then, like you said, Bubba Wallace has had a good season so far. He's had a good year. Then he's ranked 16th in the points, but that still doesn't mean he's out of earshot of being able to make the top 10. Couple of good races and maybe a win there in 1 or 2 of those races, and that could propel him up to be at least in the top 5 or near the top of the point standings. So yeah, Bubba Wallace, I've really got to admit, he has remained focused so far this year. These certain things can happen that go and knock these drivers off their pedestal after a while. They may be running good. And then we had the thing like what happened last year. Bubba Wallace was in contention, Kyle Larson, and then the bump and everything happened at Las Vegas last year in the latter stages of the season. You know, that kind of put a downer point on Bubba Wallace's season up to that point, because coming out and then just beating up Kyle Larson there, at least, you know, laying a couple of slaps on him, it didn't look good for him. But he's kind of decided to right that ship a little bit more. And I think we're going to see a lot more better things out of him this season than what we saw last year.
So this West Coast swing wraps up this Sunday at Phoenix, 3:30 Eastern time start, and it's the first of the 2 races at Phoenix. Of course, the season ends in Phoenix with the championship race way down the line, a few months away, several months away. So tell us about Phoenix and who runs well there. And also, I mean, I know when there's 2 races on a track, one's, you know, early in the year, one's late in the year, they may run a little differently. How different is Phoenix in the spring as opposed to the fall?
Well, it depends on what the temperature is. I mean, if the temperature is, you know, at least probably like what it was in Las Vegas, 50s or 60s, then we've got a chance for anybody to, you know, pretty much on this race, sort of like what it could have been at Las Vegas, temperatures in the 50s, 60s. If they were in the 70s, we'd have probably seen a lot more competitive racing than what we did. You know, you had that one car getting out to the front dominant. We might see some of that again at Phoenix. Yeah, to me, there's a difference, I think, in early on and racing right now in March, as opposed to racing in the championship, the last race of the season there in November. And that is, you're still trying to find your groove. You're still trying to find what makes this team tick. And you'd rather find out at a Phoenix, and you'd rather find out early on, as opposed to trying to pick up all the pieces when you get to the championship weekend in that first or second week of November. I think for a lot of these teams, it's going to be deciding time. This is going to see how well they perform on a short track, and I call it a short track, but more of a flat track, and preparing some of these drivers before they get to Martinsville. And when they get to Martinsville in April, we'll see a lot more, I guess, consistency on some of these drivers, how well they do on some of the short tracks, as opposed to what we've seen at Daytona, and then also what we saw at Auto Club Speedway out in California. So we'll see a difference, of course. And in the spring, I think they're still just trying to get their feel for the way everything is, the way the team is set up. Some things start kind of gelling at this point. You know, by at least the third, fourth race of the season, things start to gel a little bit more. And I think for myself, I might even see a Kevin Harvick win this race, because Kevin Harvick, this has been one of his favorite tracks. He hasn't had a good year. Last year didn't have the best of years until he started winning. And then, you know, right there toward the very end, thought he was going to be in contention, and then gets knocked out, has all this trouble happen. But he's got out of the gate pretty well this season. He's been there. He's still running when the races are over with. I would kind of give Kevin Harvick a little bit of an advantage right there too. I really wouldn't rule out, you know, Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch likes Phoenix too. Richard Childress Racing seems to be hitting on all cylinders right now. They didn't win the race on Sunday at Las Vegas, but they like these kind of tracks. Kyle Busch likes these kind of tracks. That'd be a good one to see too. But I really don't want to rule out an AJ Allmendinger. You know, he went out late. I think he had some trouble there on the last lap, I think, after everything had already been called, and he hit, bounced off the wall on the inside. They were jockeying for position. But, you know, AJ Allmendinger loves these kind of tracks, and he loves Phoenix. And I think there might be a possibility, if they can get him at least in the top 5, he could be in contention for a big cup win coming up at Phoenix. So between them, I would have to say it'd have to be Harvick, has to be Kyle Busch, or maybe an AJ Allmendinger out of that bunch. Include a Martin Truex in there just for good measure. I'm really not impressed with Denny Hamlin right now. Denny Hamlin has been not doing so well. He made a choice yesterday. He made what some people might regard as a bonehead move, trying to go right there at the very end, and it ended up moving him backwards as he was going back through there. They couldn't keep together, and when that happened, he lost a lot of time and lost some positions out of it. So I'd really have to give an edge in the Joe Gibbs team to probably Martin Truex right now, but don't rule out a Denny Hamlin, because this could be his track to kind of shine on and wake back up that team that so desperately needs a good performance this time around.
Feel like we're ready for Phoenix on Sunday. 3:30 p.m. ET is the starting time. And Rod will, of course, keep us up to date during the day on Facebook on Augusta Free Press. And then he and I will get back together next Monday and break it all down. Rod, thank you for your time today.
Appreciate it, Chris, and good luck. Have a good time at the ACC tournament coming up. I'm looking forward to hearing what happens with UVA as they go down the stretch here. Of course, you're going to have to wait, a day or two, I guess, before they'll kick in with games with that double bye. But looking forward to hearing and finding out your reports and everything from down in Greensboro, along with Jerry Ratcliffe too, and having those reports there from them. So always good when you guys go down to Greensboro or go cover the ACC tournament. It's always just great fun.
Well, thanks for saying that. Yeah, Team AFP, Chris Graham, Scott German heading down tomorrow. We'll be down there actually for the Virginia Tech game tomorrow night. And then Virginia doesn't play all the way until Thursday night. So, yeah, we have to bide our time at that stage. Augusta Free Press and JerryRatcliffe.com will have all the coverage, as Rod mentioned there. So, yeah, thanks, Rod. And thanks again for your time today.
No problem. Appreciate it.